This is the Palin Update on SarahNet Radio. I'm Kevin Scholla.
I dare say we already have a third party. We've got the liberal Democrats, we've got the GOP machine, and then we've got the good guys. That's the third party.
The government shutdown continues. So if you're wondering who will spy on us, waste our money, and have contempt for us, we'll examine. Plus, we'll try to gauge how long the shutdown will last. Joining us today to talk about it all, one of the few in Washington who makes sense, Representative Steve King of Iowa is here. After his appearance right here on the Palin Update, Sarah Palin endorsed Steve Lonegan. Governor Palin compares and contrasts Benjamin Netanyahu and Barack Obama. Palin uses hunting to send Republicans a clear message, breaking down the barricades, and Thomas Sowell hits the nail on the head yet again. A brand new Commonwealth Common Sense with Susan Stimson, and just ahead, our latest edition of Steel Resolve with Sarah Steelman. He is the U.S. Representative from Iowa's 4th District, a voice of reason in Washington. Congressman Steve King, welcome to the Palin Update on SarahNet Radio.
Thanks a lot for having me on, Kevin.
So the government shutdown continues. No Armageddon. We were all surprised by that. But your opinion, sir, how long will this go?
No one really knows how long it will go, but I think that we crossed an important divide at midnight last Monday night. I called it. We passed the witching hour. There were knees that were knocking as the clock was ticking down, and I was in my office, so when I did have me looking up, but when it struck midnight, I know that my staff noted it to all of us, and it seemed to change the demeanor of a good number of members of Congress that thought that the roof was going to cave in and the sky would fall. But now what really happened was the lid went on the pressure cooker and the clamps went down, and the fire gets turned up a little more heat on it every day. And as that happens, we get closer and closer to a solution, and it becomes, who's going to crack, who's going to give, and right now it looks to me like it's coming the way of the constitutional conservatives in that unanimously in the House yesterday, everybody voted to take care of the pay of our federal workers. And so that's the first time that we've seen a full unanimous crack in that way. And we know that the Senate also ratified by voice vote Congressman Louis Gohmert's bill to pay the troops first. So this is starting to move in our direction, and we'll see whose nerves start to rattle here. But it is very much going to be whichever direction public opinion goes, so will go Congress. That's what's happening here. And for me, I'm going to hold my ground and say no funding for Obamacare. It's got to go. Whatever the consequences might be politically, and actually I think there are rewards politically rather than consequences, we will recover from them, but we can never recover from Obamacare if it's implemented completely. And that's the stand we have to understand, and that's the stand we have to take.
Well, we appreciate that from you, and your point is well taken. I think there are political rewards as well, and I can't understand, it's so unpopular, Obamacare. These Republicans ran against it, yet now they come in and want to play ball. Now, the debt ceiling comes into play later this month. What effect will that have?
Well, at this point, I'm saying let's deal with the CR, and if the calendar turns over to the point where we get near that October 17th date that the administration has said is a hard deadline, that we must have it resolved by then. And by the way, there's a lot of fear factor that gets injected into that, too. And if you listen to Jack Lew today, as he was going on the network TV, he just continually was discussing this idea that we're going to hit default and America's never defaulted and we can never be allowed to default. Well, that's all true, Secretary Lew. But, the truth is that we're not going to default, and we're not in a default situation come October 17th. We can always, at least indefinitely into the foreseeable future, we can pay the interest on our debt, and we can service that debt. So there's really this fear factor of default just doesn't exist. But if you can get both of these issues together, if this shutdown, and it's a partial shutdown, works its way day by day, and the pressure builds and builds, but if that something doesn't crack before that October 17th day, we're going to find out whether the debt ceiling is actually a hard date or whether it's one that can be moved forward. I'm very confident it's one that can be moved forward. But if the two of those issues conflate into each other, we've got a whole new ballgame. No one has ever been through that before, as far as I know. There's not a historical model to study as if this were actually a science instead of an art. So I don't know what happens, but it comes down to whose nerves are the strongest and where will the American people stand. If the wobbly members of Congress continually hear from their constituents who say, listen, we can put up with some short-term pain, but we can never let Obamacare be implemented or enforced. Stand and hold your ground. What I called for today was, if you want to look for a debt ceiling deal, here's my deal. Let's pass a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution out of the House and the Senate and message it to the states for ratification. Do that, and I'll support a debt ceiling increase, because that opens the door for the states to ratify and to compel Congress to act in what would be then, according to a constitutional amendment. That's the long-term best fix we can have for the financial straits that we are in, including addressing our entitlements.
Yeah, you mentioned Lou. He's definitely using the scare tactics, phrases like Congress playing with fire and things of that nature, so we know the rhetoric. What do you make of the closing of our veterans' memorials?
It's terrible, Kevin. It is the most spiteful act. I mean, this came out of the White House. This is not the Secretary of the Interior didn't give this order, one of her subordinates didn't, and that's a cabinet position, so there's nobody between the Secretary of the Interior and the President. This is a presidential order, or an order that came out of the Oval Office. And can you imagine sitting in the Oval Office as President of the United States, going into a shutdown, and having one of your subordinates order to shut down the World War II Memorial when there are chartered planes, wheels up, in here with 90-year-old veterans that have never been to Washington before in their life, coming to see the memorial that's built to honor them and their buddies and the warriors who lost their lives across in the Atlantic or the Pacific Ocean. That's an appalling thing, and it had to come from the out-of-touch president who was not raised with an American experience, who somehow thinks that his rule can apply. So I think it is the most spiteful act committed by the commander-in-chief of our armed forces in the history of this country. And I've gone down there every day except Wednesday. There were a lot of people down there on Wednesday. They didn't need me. But I've gone down there every day since then, including today, and simply moved barricades, opened them up, invited people in, invited them into each of the memorials, being World War II, Vietnam, Korea, and Lincoln. The president has no legal authority to close down these memorials under the excuse of a government shutdown. This shutdown says essential services shall continue. That's the law. Well, there were no services to barricade these memorials. The president instead, I did an interview with the Chinese television network, Red China, if you will, right from inside the World War II Memorial, and that was on Tuesday. And they asked me about this, and I said, here's what's happening. The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States, the President of the United States of America, is borrowing money from China to rent barricades, calling park workers off of furlough to come down with forklifts to carry these barricades out and build barricades around the World War II Memorial, around Vietnam Memorial, Korea, and Lincoln, and doing so with people that are supposedly on furlough. And it's appalling that they would do that. So a number of members of Congress have been out and opening up barricades. The Park Service people are real good. I've had good relations with them. They don't want to be doing this, but you just need to go there. They can't tell them. They can tell them that the parks are closed, but they can't tell them that there's no penalty for walking in. And so standing at the Korean Memorial yesterday with Michelle Bachmann, the two of us went and did that round yesterday. We're standing there. The gates are closed, and there's a guard on the barriers. The rented barriers are sitting across the sidewalk. What it is. A Park Service officer was standing inside those barriers, right on the path. And there were some people who would come, and they were stacking up at those barriers. And every once in a while, someone would step over that low chain on the side, walk around through the grass, right around the park officer, step back over the chain and down the sidewalk to the Korean Memorial. They were wearing out the grass. And so we just went up there and said, "Officer, what are you doing here? Ranger, what are you doing here?" And he said, "I'm here to inform people the park is closed." So we said, "Well, it's not. It's open." We opened the barricades and invited people in, shook their hand. We did that at Vietnam Wall, and we went up into the Lincoln Memorial as well.
Well, I'm sure that was well received by our veterans. Sarah Palin says we already have a three-party system here, Congressman. Democrats, the GOP machine, and then good guys. So let me ask you this. How tough is it for good guys like yourself, like Michelle Bachmann, when we continually see Republicans cave?
Well, I don't actually think it's that tough. I mean, because we have a group of true believers inside the Republican conference, and you've named some of them, And they are going to stand strong, and no one wonders if we're going to blink. And so they're not putting a lot of pressure on us because they've convinced that, we can't be swayed, that we're going to hold our ground. This is a battle we've fought for 4 years. And we fought it going into Obamacare. We called tens of thousands of people to this Capitol. They came. They came from all 50 states. And they surrounded the Capitol for the first time in history and chanted, "We won't go," and rattled the windows while Nancy Pelosi was trying to, I'll say, rig the game in the Rules Committee, which she successfully did. So we're not going to blink. I had the first draft of the repeal of Obamacare. Michelle Bachmann introduced the first draft of the repeal of Obamacare. I brought the discharge petition in 2010. We have fought that all along, and no one wonders what we're going to do. So we've been there with this. And the language that says that we'll cut off all funding to implement or enforce Obamacare is the language that I wrote after the election in 2010 in that lame duck session, and a language that I offered on the floor of the House then, which passed but was peeled off in the Senate. So we are standing on the same principles. And I will continually hear Democrats say, Obamacare is the law of the land. We've had an intervening election. Barack Obama was reelected. The Supreme Court has ruled it constitutional. So therefore, you're obligated to fund it because they must think there's a constitutional obligation for that. Well, most of what they've said is true, but we have no constitutional obligation to do anything except offer to provide for our constituents and the American people our best effort and our best judgment within the constitutional authority we have. But what has happened is Barack Obama has at least twice unconstitutionally amended Obamacare. When he wrote the executive edict that undid the carve-out for the exchange there was the Grassley Amendment, that was unconstitutional on Barack Obama's part. He had no authority to do that. And when he extended the employer mandate for another year, that was also clearly unconstitutional because the clear letter of the law is that provision shall be implemented in each month after December of 2013. He had to go to Congress to get that changed. And so we're not dealing with a constitutional law here. We're dealing with Barack Obama's executive waivers and his executive changes. We should, constitutional conservatives in this Congress, should take a stand against Obamacare and say, we only need one reason to tell you we're not going to give you a dime to fund Obamacare, and that is you've violated the Constitution in amending it. You have no authority to do so, and we have an obligation to uphold our oath of office, and so no money. Now, there are plenty of other reasons, but that one alone should be enough to get us to stick together, and I'm going to continue to push that point harder as we go forward, Kevin.
When I last ran into you in D.C., you said to me, Sarah Palin is your kind of person, and she just keeps getting everything right, too, doesn't she? From death panels to Obama's ineptness, you name it.
What's so good about this? And I smile when you say that to me. And what's so good about this is there are some people in this business, you can listen to them, and you watch the way they react. And when they're, it was General Petraeus that first drove this point home to me when he was commanding the 101st in Iraq. Be there first with the truth. Well, part of this, you don't have time to run this all the way back through all the filters and do the polling. You have to look at things, take the facts you have, issue your response. Sarah Palin is excellent at being there first with the truth. Her instincts are excellent. Her conservative credentials point to true north. And you know that if you listen to her talk, if you look at the timing, if you look at the statements she makes. Her statements are unique. They're on point. Her conservatism points to true north, and that's a rare commodity to find in this business. So, yes, and I really like to listen to her and watch her. She's a great voice here in America.
Well, Congressman King, we appreciate everything you're doing. You continue to fight for us. You continue to fight for our veterans. You continue to fight against Obamacare. Meantime, the president's talking about the Washington Redskins nickname. So we really do appreciate what you're doing, and we know that you'll keep it going for us.
Well, Kevin, tell me if I need to draft a constitutional amendment to protect the Washington Redskins trademark from the president, who seems to think that we ought to be more sensitive.
I will let you know, and I'll also let you know if you need to draft something for me to get my Bears back on track, because I'm a little down after 2 losses in a row.
I think they're out of constitutional reach, the Bears, but I think good luck to them the rest of the season.
Listen, thanks again, and we'll talk to you again soon, I hope.
All my pleasure.
All right.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
Congressman Steve King on the Palin Update, one of the men in Washington really fighting for us along with Michelle Bachmann and standing up for our veterans and actually getting out there and doing some things around those barricades the last few days and saying no to Obamacare, not caving like so many have. Just a pleasure to have Steve King here today. Steve Lonigan, fresh off his SarahNet radio interview, officially gained a grizzly bear-sized endorsement. Sarah Palin backing Lonigan in his race for U.S. Senate in New Jersey. Governor Palin saying, quote, New Jersey has the choice of 2 mayors to send to the U.S. Senate. Only one of these mayors has embraced and governed by the values of New Jersey's state motto, liberty and prosperity. During one mayor's tenure, his town's unemployment nearly doubled, taxes skyrocketed, and violent crime increased. But in fairness, Newark Mayor Cory Booker may not have noticed these facts between his constant tweeting and trips to Hollywood. Contrast this with Mayor Steve Lonigan. As mayor, Steve cut wasteful spending, eliminated wasteful services, stabilized taxes, and reduced debt. Perhaps it was Steve's prior experience as a successful small business owner and entrepreneur that encouraged him to lead with conservative principles. He understands that government is too often the problem, not the solution. Unquote. To help out Steve's campaign, just go to LoniganForSenate.com. So who would you like to have in charge, Benjamin Netanyahu or Barack Obama? Sarah Palin brilliantly portrayed the two men as stark opposites this past week. Palin saying, quote, the leader of the free world just followed Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's honest, visionary, and serious UN speech with a speech of his own in the Rose Garden. More like it, President Obama just recorded essentially an infomercial on the disastrous Obamacare rollout. In a speech full of unserious claims and low-level false accusations against those who disagree with his liberal, unworkable policies, this president engaged in doublespeak without even blinking. It was unreal. Unquote. Much more to read on that one. Be sure to check it out. Will the GOP ever wake up? If not, it won't be for Sarah Palin's lack of trying. The governor posted a picture of Todd Palin and a moose and wrote, yeah, Todd bagged a moose, dinner. Appropriate to remind folks in the GOP establishment that the progressive Bull Moose Party also met its demise, in no small part because of some liberal positions it co-opted from the left. Sarah Palin also blasted Obama for his shameful disrespect of our vets. Palin saying Obama mistreated our World War II veterans blatantly. She said, quote, Obama's political stunt to shut down their memorial by barricade is to elicit an angry response to generate bad publicity for people the president uses in his continual blame game, unquote. And who do you blame for the shutdown? Thomas Sowell says it's the Dems. Sarah Palin highlighted a Sowell piece from townhall.com. It's a must-read. Sowell says being right isn't enough, writing, unless the Republicans get their side of the story out, and articulation has never been their strong suit, the lies will win. More important, the whole country will lose. To see any of the governor's posts in their entirety, visit Sarah Palin's Facebook page or follow her on Twitter at Sarah Palin USA.
It's time for Commonwealth Common Sense with Susan Stimson and Kevin Scholla.
Hey, Susan, how's it going?
Hey, Kevin, it's going great. Just had a chance to hear Ted Cruz speak tonight in Richmond.
Well, I'm glad he has a voice, after the 21-hour speech. It's good to see he's still going and delivering that positive message.
He seems to have kept his stamina, and he is on message, and I do wish that many Americans had an opportunity to hear the other side of the story.
Now tell our listeners where you saw him speak and what the event was that he was at.
The Family Foundation was having their annual gala, and there was a fantastic turnout. I would say there was well over 1,000 people that were there at the Richmond Convention Center. And Ted Cruz was the guest speaker, but Ted Cruz's father gave his introduction, and his dad had escaped from Cuba as a teenager, and he came here to America, and he worked hard, and so he really had a story to tell.
I think it was Glenn Beck, but somebody a few months back, Steve Deace maybe, I forget who it was, so I hope I'm crediting one of the right people here, but, the sentiment will resonate either way. But I remember them saying, you don't have to worry about Ted Cruz ever flopping on us, ever changing from sticking to his guns, because all you have to do is look at his dad and hear his dad once and know that if he ever did that, forget about the American people, he'd have to answer to his dad.
It's true, and there was a touch of humor tonight, and really the whole tone and the tenor of tonight was just talking about where we are and some of the very simple truths of what is happening right now with President Obama and with Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, just simple decisions that they are making that are outrageous.
Yeah, as Sarah Palin says, those barricades, right?
Yeah, that was funny. I saw that. She's good at coming up with those one-liner quips.
Now, did Cruz speak or touch upon at all his thoughts on when this shutdown may end and or what it would take, and also not Cruz but these other Republicans? Do we see them caving once again, or will this keep going, and will they stick to it this time?
He used examples of how the American people have risen up on issues that they're paying attention to and that they care strongly about, where they can effect change. And one of those had to do with this Obamacare, the issue with Obamacare right now in Congress, that the congressmen are hearing from their people, and that's why they voted the way that they did. But also on the issue with Syria, when the people of America were very concerned that we were getting involved in a sectarian war in Syria where there were no American interests, that the president did an about-face once the people rose up. And so he does believe that this is something that is within the power of the people to effect a resolution to this. He said that he was against the shutdown, that is not at all what he wanted, and that the Congress has put forward very reasonable compromises that the president refuses to even negotiate. And from my perspective, I'm chairman of the board in Stafford, and if for some reason the government in Stafford County shut down, at the end of the day, it would be my responsibility as the chairman to bring the certain parties together to make sure that the government is functioning. And really the responsibility ultimately does lie with President Obama, and he is failing our country right now.
And meantime, while all these serious things are happening that are affecting real Americans, the president's talking about that all-important issue of whether or not the Washington Redskins name is offensive.
Yes, he's very good at shining the light on a different area.
Well, Susan, we appreciate you shining the light here on Great American Ted Cruz, who stood up for us a couple weeks ago with his 21-hour historic speech, and now able to be there with you in Virginia on a great night. So we appreciate it. Thanks for the update and the inside information, and we'll talk to you soon.
You are welcome, and we'll talk to you next week.
Susan Stimson in Virginia. More Commonwealth Common Sense next week. Now, our weekly commentary, Steel Resolve. Here's Sarah Steelman.
Thanks, Kevin. As I was eating my third brownie last night, I wondered, why am I doing this to myself? I certainly don't need any more sugar. Not only will I be mad at myself after I eat it, I won't feel good. It's unhealthy. It's self-indulgent. One was enough, but no, I had to eat 3. Why? It's a bad habit that I need to break. But breaking bad habits is tough. It takes discipline. There are foregone opportunity costs of foregoing the taste of a delicious brownie. We all know the bad habits of the governing class in Washington, D.C. Senator Rand Paul is right on the money, so to speak, when he talks about the budget process being broken. Passing a continuing resolution to run the government for 3 more weeks is no way to govern. It's a bad habit that has been allowed for too long. Rand reminds us that the normal budgeting process requires 12 separate resolutions to fund government, and that they be debated individually. Now that the Republicans are breaking that bad habit of one massive CR, the entrenched interests in D.C. are having a nervous breakdown. No, it's not politics as usual. Instead, our representatives are actually fighting for what they believe is right for the country. This is a good thing, instead of capitulating to the establishment and the so-called strategizing of political consultants who only worry about winning elections. That is the bad habit that both parties suffer from, and one that needs to be broken. Instead of being self-indulgent and going for that third brownie, let's do the right thing and form new, good habits of governing, even though it might hurt in the short run. Then maybe we won't find ourselves in this predicament again. This is Sarah Steelman for SaraNet Radio.
Tune in again next week for another segment of Steel Resolve right here on the Palin Update. The Palin Update, including Commonwealth Common Sense and Steel Resolve, is on demand and available for download. So just head to saranetradio.net, pick the show you want to hear, and you can listen anywhere, anytime. Well, that'll just about do it for this edition of the Palin Update on Saranet Radio. Visit saranetradio.net for continuing coverage of Governor Palin. Also, follow along on Twitter at Saranet Radio, at Kevin Scholla, at Susan B. Stimson, and at Sarah_Steelman. We're on Facebook, too, so like Saranet Radio and like Kevin Scholla. Palin Patriots is our feature on Saranet.net. There you can check out the writings from our great panel of contributors, including Martha Zoller and Bader Carmoot. And I'm doing some writing for Breitbart News. Just go to Breitbart.com and search Kevin Scholla. I want to thank Sarah Steelman, Susan Stimson, and everyone here at Saranet Radio. Thanks to Steve King, and thank you for listening today. Please be sure to join us again next time for another edition of the Palin Update. I'm Kevin Scholla. Have a pleasant day.